I never imagined that hiring a babysitter would unravel my family. I thought it would be simple, a young, energetic girl who would watch over my toddler while I focused on the career I had worked so hard to build. Her name was Chloe, barely 20, with a bright smile and an easy demeanor that instantly charmed both my son, Liam, and my husband, Ethan. I didn't think twice about trusting her. But trust can be a dangerous thing. It started with little things. Ethan began coming home earlier than usual, often catching Chloe at the tail end of her shift. He would linger, chatting with her while she packed up Liam's toys or filled out the checklist I left for the day. I chalked it up to Ethan being friendly. He's always been the outgoing type. But the way Chloe's laughter filled the house, the way she glowed under his attention, planted the first seed of doubt in my mind. One night, I worked late and called Ethan to let him know I'd be home by 9 p.m. He seemed distracted on the phone, his responses clipped. I arrived home at 8:45, earlier than planned. As I entered the living room, I was greeted by an unsettling sight. Ethan and Chloe sitting too close on the couch, their heads bent together over something on his phone. The tension in the air was palpable, and Chloe's face flushed bright red when she saw me.
Oh,
"Mrs. Green, you're home early," she stammered, scrambling to her feet. Ethan stood, looking equally flustered. "We were just, I was showing her pictures of the renovation ideas for the basement," he said quickly, sliding his phone into his pocket. I forced a smile. "That's nice."
Chloe, you can head out now.
"I'll see you tomorrow." She practically bolted for the door. Ethan mumbled something about needing to check on work emails and disappeared into the study. I sat there, replaying the scene in my head, and felt a pang of unease. But I brushed it off. Maybe I was overthinking things. The next day, Ethan left for work early, leaving me to handle Liam and Chloe's arrival. When she walked in, I decided to test the waters. "Chloe, you've been doing a great job with Liam. He's always so happy when you're around," I said, watching her carefully. She smiled nervously. "Thank you, Mrs. Green. He's such a sweet kid. You know, Ethan seems to enjoy chatting with you too," I added lightly, though my gaze didn't waver. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second before she recovered. "Mr. Green is very nice," she said quickly, focusing on unpacking her bag. That evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I decided to come home early again, this time without warning. When I stepped into the house, I heard voices upstairs. Quietly, I climbed the stairs, my heart pounding. The door to Liam's room was slightly ajar, and through the crack, I saw Ethan and Chloe standing close. Too close. He was whispering something to her, and she was giggling, her hand lightly touching his arm. I pushed the door open. They jumped apart, as if electrocuted. Liam was asleep in his crib, oblivious to the tension in the room. "Am I interrupting something?" I asked, my voice colder than I intended. "Of course not," Ethan said quickly, his face turning a deep shade of red. "Chloe was just, checking the baby monitor. Right, Chloe?" Chloe nodded, her eyes wide with guilt. "Yes, I was just making sure it was working properly."
I didn't respond.
Instead, I turned and walked out of the room, my chest tight with anger and disbelief. That night, Ethan tried to act normal, but I barely spoke to him. The images of him and Chloe, the way they interacted, were burned into my mind. The next morning, I called Chloe and told her she didn't need to come in anymore. She sounded relieved, almost eager to agree. Ethan didn't protest, which only added to my suspicions. I decided it was time to dig deeper. If there was something going on, I would find out, and I would make sure they both regretted it. Ethan left for work that morning as if nothing had happened. His kiss on my cheek felt like a lie, and his cheerful goodbye seemed rehearsed. My suspicions gnawed at me, refusing to be silenced. It was time to act. If there was any truth to the betrayal I feared, I needed proof. Fate seemed to intervene when Ethan called me an hour after leaving the house. "I forgot my phone," he said, irritation evident in his tone. "Can you keep it safe until I'm home?" I assured him I would and hung up, staring at the device sitting on the kitchen counter. He'd always kept it password protected, but I knew him too well. I tried a few combinations and finally unlocked it with Liam's birthday. My hands shook as I navigated through his apps. There were no incriminating messages in his texts, nothing suspicious in his call log. Just as I was about to give up, I opened his photo gallery. There it was. A folder labeled Special Moments, buried among pictures of our family vacations and Liam's milestones. Inside, I found a series of photos that sent a chill down my spine. Pictures of Chloe and Ethan, some innocent, others less so. The way they looked at each other, the playful touches, it was undeniable. My heart sank, but my resolve hardened. If Ethan thought he could make a fool out of me, he was sorely mistaken. I decided to confront him that evening. When he came home, I acted normal, even cheerful. Over dinner, I asked about his day, watching his every move, every twitch. He seemed relaxed, unaware of the storm brewing inside me. "Ethan, I need your help with something," I said after we had put Liam to bed. "Can you show me those renovation ideas you were talking about with Chloe the other night?" His face froze for a split second before he smiled. Sure. I'll pull them up on my phone later." "No need," I said, pulling his phone out of my pocket and sliding it across the table. I already looked. Found some interesting things in the process. His expression darkened as he picked up the phone, scrolling through it. "You went through my phone?" "I did." "Imagine my surprise when I found your little special moments folder." "Care to explain?" He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, his face crumpled with a mix of anger and guilt. "It's not what it looks like," he finally said. "Really?" "Because it looks like you've been crossing boundaries with the girl I trusted to care for our child." "Tell me, Ethan, how far did it go?" "It was just," he hesitated, avoiding my eyes. "It was just harmless flirting. Nothing serious, I swear." I laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. "Harmless? Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? To know that my husband's been sneaking around with a babysitter in my own home?" He didn't answer. The silence was deafening, filled only by the sound of my anger boiling over. "You know what? Don't bother explaining. I'll find out the truth myself," I said, grabbing my coat. "Where are you going?" he asked, panic flashing in his eyes. "To talk to Chloe," I snapped. "Since you clearly can't be honest, maybe she will." I drove to Chloe's apartment, my mind racing. Part of me dreaded what I might uncover, but the other part needed closure. When she opened the door, her face went pale. "Mrs. Green," she said, her voice trembling. "What are you doing here?" "We need to talk," I said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "I know about you and Ethan." Her eyes widened, and she sank onto the couch. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for it to happen. He made me feel special, and I got caught up in it. But I swear it's over." "How far did it go?" I demanded, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "We kissed a few times," she admitted, tears streaming down her face. "But that's all." I ended it because I knew it was wrong. Her confession hit me like a punch to the gut. I had suspected, but hearing it confirmed was a different kind of pain. Still, something about her demeanor didn't sit right with me. "Is that the whole truth, Chloe? Because if I find out you're lying, there will be consequences." She hesitated, biting her lip. There's more," she said finally. "But I don't think you want to know." "Try me," I said, crossing my arms. Chloe took a deep breath, her hands trembling. "It's not just Ethan. I think he's hiding something else. Something bigger." Her words sent a shiver down my spine. "What are you talking about?" "I don't know for sure," she said quickly. "But there were times he'd get calls when I was here. He'd leave the room, and when he came back, he'd act strange. Nervous, like he was hiding something. I think he's seeing someone else too." The room spun as her words sank in. If Chloe was telling the truth, Ethan's betrayal went deeper than I had imagined. And I wasn't sure I was ready to face what lay beneath the surface. The drive home from Chloe's apartment felt like a blur. My mind raced with the possibilities her words had unearthed. Ethan seeing someone else? As if his betrayal with Chloe wasn't enough, there might be another woman? I didn't know what to believe anymore, but I knew I couldn't stop now. If there were deeper secrets, I needed to unearth them, no matter the cost. When I got home, Ethan was in the living room, pacing like a caged animal. He turned sharply when I walked in. "Where have you been?" he demanded, his voice taut with barely controlled anger. "Talking to Chloe," I replied evenly, setting my bag down. She had a lot to say. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Whatever she told you, it's not true." "Oh, really?" "Because she confirmed what I already suspected. And then she told me something else, something about you hiding more than just a fling with her." His eyes widened briefly before he schooled his expression into one of indifference. "She's lying." I stepped closer, my anger simmering just below the surface. "Is she? Because the way you're acting right now makes me think she's telling the truth." "You're being paranoid," he snapped. "This is what happens when you start looking for things that aren't there." "Paranoid?" I said, my voice rising. "Don't you dare gaslight me, Ethan. I have the photos. I have Chloe's confession. And if there's more, I will find out. So why don't you save us both the trouble and just tell me the truth?" He stared at me, his face a mask of fury and something else. Fear. But he said nothing. The silence was louder than any confession. That night, I barely slept. My mind was too preoccupied with what Chloe had said about the calls.
Who was he talking to?
What was he hiding? At 2 a.m., as Ethan slept soundly beside me, I made my move. His phone was cradled loosely in his hand as he drifted into a deep sleep beside me. I held my breath and carefully slid it from his grasp, praying he wouldn't stir. Once I had the phone, I tiptoed downstairs, unlocked it again, and started digging. I opened his email, scanning through mundane work messages until one thread caught my eye. It was from a woman named Marissa, with the subject line, "Looking forward to Friday." My heart pounded as I clicked on it. The emails were flirtatious, filled with inside jokes and references to meetings I knew nothing about. And then there was an attachment, a photo of them together, standing too close for comfort, his hand on her waist. My stomach churned as I stared at it. This wasn't just another betrayal, it was an entirely separate life. The next day, I decided to play it smart. If Ethan was living a double life, I needed more than just a few emails. I needed undeniable proof. While he was at work, I hired a private investigator. His name was Mark, and he came highly recommended. I explained the situation, and he assured me he would uncover the truth. "This kind of thing is more common than you think," he said, handing me a card with his contact information. "If there's something to find, I'll find it." For the next week, I acted like everything was normal. Ethan seemed to relax, likely thinking I had dropped the issue. But inside, I was a volcano waiting to erupt. Every evening, I'd check in with Mark. He'd send me updates, photos, and recordings that painted a damning picture of Ethan's deceit. Marissa wasn't just a fling. She was someone he had been seeing for months. They met during business trips, and their relationship was far more intimate than what he'd had with Chloe. There were dinner dates, weekend getaways, and whispered phone calls. The sheer extent of his betrayal left me breathless. One night, Mark sent me a video. It showed Ethan and Marissa at a restaurant, holding hands across the table. He leaned in to kiss her, and she smiled in a way that made my blood boil. But it wasn't just the sight of them together that broke me. It was what happened next. Marissa placed a hand on her stomach and said something that made Ethan's face light up with joy. Mark had caught the audio clearly. "The baby's doing fine. The doctor says everything looks good." The baby. Ethan's child. My knees buckled, and I had to sit down. This wasn't just infidelity anymore. He had started a new family while destroying ours. I spent the next day in a daze, trying to process what I had learned. But as much as it hurt, it also gave me clarity. Ethan had made his choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. That evening, I told him we needed to talk. "What now?" he asked, irritation creeping into his voice. I placed the video on the table between us. "Care to explain this?" He stared at the screen, his face pale. For a moment, I thought he might deny it, but then his shoulders slumped. "I messed up," he said quietly. "Messed up?" I repeated, my voice trembling with rage. "You didn't just mess up, Ethan. You destroyed our family. You're having a child with another woman. Do you have any idea what you've done?" He opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. Save it. I don't want to hear your excuses. I've heard enough lies to last a lifetime. I stood, my decision clear. I'll be filing for divorce. And trust me, Ethan, you're going to pay for what you've done. As I walked away, I felt a strange sense of relief. The truth had broken me, but it had also set me free. Ethan's betrayal had shattered our marriage, but it had also shown me my own strength. And for that, I was grateful. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of emotions. I avoided Ethan as much as possible, throwing myself into making arrangements to move forward with a divorce. I met with my lawyer, outlined my case, and made sure the evidence Mark had gathered was securely backed up. But even as I took steps to distance myself from Ethan, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more I didn't know. Mark called me 2 days later with an update that shook me to my core. "We've found something unusual," he said. "It's about Marissa?" "What is it?" I asked, gripping the phone tightly. "She's not just some random mistress," he said. "She's connected to Ethan's company. Specifically, she works in a department that oversees high-level accounts. I've also discovered that she's been making large transfers into an offshore account. It's possible Ethan is involved." The room seemed to tilt as I processed his words. "Are you saying this isn't just personal? That it's financial?" "It's looking that way," Mark replied. "I've forwarded you the details. Take a look and let me know how you want to proceed." After we hung up, I opened the files he sent. The evidence was damning. Not only was Ethan betraying me emotionally, but he was also entangled in what looked like a financial scheme with Marissa. The transactions were too large and too frequent to be innocent. I needed more information. That evening, I confronted Ethan with the financial evidence. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I demanded, throwing the printouts onto the table. "This isn't just infidelity anymore. You're committing fraud. Are you trying to destroy everything we've built?" Ethan's face went pale as he scanned the documents. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Does it matter?" "Answer the question, Ethan." He slumped into a chair, his head in his hands. "It's not what it looks like," he mumbled. "Don't you dare insult my intelligence," I snapped. "Marissa works for your company. She's been funneling money offshore, and your name is all over it. How long did you think you could keep this hidden?" Ethan looked up at me, desperation in his eyes. "I didn't have a choice," he said. "Marissa came to me with a proposal. She said it was a way to secure our future, to make sure Liam would have everything he needed. But it got out of control. I didn't know how to stop it." I laughed bitterly. "Don't you dare try to make this about Liam. You've been lying to me, betraying me, and now you've dragged our family into something that could ruin us. Do you even care about what happens to your son?" His silence was all the answer I needed. The next morning, I met with Mark again to discuss our options. "We need to expose this," I said. "But I need to protect Liam and myself. If Ethan's going down, I'm not going with him." Mark nodded. "I can work on gathering more concrete evidence. But you need to be careful. If Ethan realizes what you're planning, he might take drastic measures." That evening, as I was putting Liam to bed, Ethan cornered me in the hallway. His face was a mask of fury and fear. "What are you planning to do?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. I met his gaze, refusing to back down. "What I should have done a long time ago. I'm protecting my son and myself." "You've left me no choice, Ethan." He stepped closer, his body tense. "You're making a mistake. If this gets out, it'll ruin everything. Our family, my career, Liam's future. Is that what you want?" I stared at him, incredulous. "You think you can guilt me into staying quiet? After everything you've done?" He didn't respond, but the look in his eyes sent a chill down my spine. I knew I had to act fast. The next day, I filed for divorce and handed over everything Mark had uncovered to the authorities. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the right one. Ethan's actions had consequences, and it was time for him to face them. 2 days later, I got a call from Mark. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "There's been a development." "What now?" I asked, bracing myself. "Marissa's disappeared. Her accounts have been wiped, and there's no trace of her. It's like she vanished into thin air." The blood drained from my face. "What does that mean for Ethan's?" It means he's on his own, Mark said grimly. And if she was the mastermind behind the scheme, he's about to take the fall for all of it. I sat down, my mind reeling. Ethan had betrayed me in every way imaginable, but I never wanted him to face this alone. For Liam's sake, I had to find out the truth. And for the first time, I wondered if I'd ever truly known the man I had married. The day the authorities arrived, Ethan's world imploded. They came early, their presence as ominous as the truth that had finally caught up to him. I watched from the living room window as they escorted him into a car, his face a mixture of defiance and despair. Liam, thankfully, was too young to understand, distracted by the cartoons playing in the background. But I couldn't shield him from the consequences forever. Ethan's arrest made headlines. The financial scheme Marissa had orchestrated was deeper and more complex than I could have imagined. Offshore accounts, fraudulent contracts, shell companies, it was all there, a tangled web of deceit that Ethan had willingly become a part of. But as the investigation unfolded, so did more horrifying truths. Marissa had not vanished entirely. She reappeared briefly, not to clear Ethan's name, but to save herself. In exchange for immunity, she provided the authorities with every detail of their operation, painting Ethan as the central figure. Whether it was true or not, I couldn't say. But the media ran with the narrative, and Ethan became the scapegoat. I visited him in jail once. The man sitting across from me was a shadow of the person I had married. His once confident demeanor was replaced by a broken, desperate shell. I didn't do everything they're saying, he insisted, his voice hoarse. Marissa lied. She's framing me to save herself. You lied too, Ethan, I replied, my voice cold. To me, to Liam, to everyone who trusted you. Whether or not you were the mastermind doesn't matter anymore. You chose this path, and now you're paying for it. Tears welled in his eyes. I didn't mean to hurt you. Or Liam. I thought I could fix it before it got this far. I leaned back, staring at the man who had once been my partner, my love. You can't undo what you've done, Ethan. And you can't expect me to clean up your mess. Liam and I are moving forward. Without you. As I left the prison, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It wasn't closure, it was too raw, too painful for that. But it was a step toward reclaiming my life. Over the next few months, I rebuilt. I sold the house, moved closer to my parents, and focused on providing Liam with a stable, loving environment. The divorce was finalized, and with the settlement came the realization that Ethan's financial decisions had left us with far less than I had anticipated. But what we had was enough. More than enough. One evening, as I tucked Liam into bed, he looked up at me with his wide, innocent eyes. "Where's Daddy?" he asked softly. I took a deep breath, struggling to find the right words. "Daddy had to go away for a while," I said gently. "But Mommy's here, and I'll always be here for you." He nodded, satisfied for now, and snuggled into his blankets. As I watched him drift off to sleep, I felt a surge of determination. Liam deserved better than the life Ethan had tried to build. He deserved honesty, stability, and love. And I would give him all of that, and more. Months turned into a year, and slowly, the wounds began to heal. I found a new job, one that allowed me to spend more time with Liam. I made friends, built a support system, and started to rediscover who I was outside of being Ethan's wife. There were moments of doubt, moments where the weight of everything threatened to crush me. But I held on, driven by the knowledge that I was stronger than I had ever realized. Ethan's trial came and went, and he was sentenced to a lengthy prison term. I didn't attend the sentencing. By then, I had let go of the anger and betrayal that had consumed me. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was peace. One day, I received a letter from Ethan. It was brief, filled with apologies and regret. He asked about Liam, said he hoped to see him one day. I didn't respond. Some wounds take longer to heal, and some relationships can never be repaired. As I stood in the backyard one sunny afternoon, watching Liam play with a new friend from school, I realized that life had a way of moving forward, even when it felt impossible. The past would always be a part of me, but it didn't define me. I was more than Ethan's wife. more than the woman he had betrayed. I was a mother, a fighter, and above all, a survivor. And as the sun set on another day, I knew that whatever lay ahead, I would face it with the strength and resilience I had found within myself. Because sometimes, the greatest betrayal can lead to the most profound transformation.